You're listening to Midnight Whispers AI01, your trusted portal into the strange, the unexplained, and the truths whispered between the cracks of reality. First off, a huge thank you to all of you, seriously. The likes, the subscriptions, comments, shares, it's incredible. The Midnight Whispers family is growing so fast, and honestly, we're just blown away by how many curious, thoughtful people are joining us every single day. It really shows us one thing: you're all searching for answers, just like we are, and that's what keeps us digging, keeps us exploring these topics night after night. Tonight's deep dive, well, it's into one of the most enduring mysteries of North America. Bigfoot. Is it just a legend, some kind of misdirection? Or could it be a real creature hiding out there in the vast forgotten forests? We've gone through a mountain of sources for this one: ancient stories, modern footage, scientific papers, you name it, and we're ready to unpack it all for you.
It's a really compelling topic, isn't it? Because it hits on so many things. Our curiosity, our fears, maybe that primal urge to find something hidden, something wild. And the sources we've looked at give us a pretty wide view. We can trace the history, look at the supposed evidence, understand the scientific skepticism, and even touch on some of the, well, stranger theories. So our mission tonight really is to explore all these different angles and help you, our listener, get a really solid understanding of the whole Bigfoot phenomenon.
Perfect. Okay, let's start right at the beginning then. When people talk about Bigfoot, what are we actually describing? What do the common reports say about how it looks, how it acts, where it might live?
Right. Well, the descriptions that keep coming up again and again from witnesses paint a picture of something pretty imposing. We're talking a massive, bulky, bipedal walks on two legs, hairy, primate-like creature. Think really big. Typical height seems to be around 2 to 2.5 meters. That's, 6.5 to over 8 feet tall?
8 feet tall. Already impressive.
But some reports push it even further, up to maybe 3.5 meters. That's nearly 12 feet.
12 feet. Okay, that's enormous.
And the weight estimates match, usually somewhere between 230 and 350 kilograms.
Yeah.
So roughly 500 up to almost 800 pounds. Just a really solid, powerful build.
That is a lot of creature to hide. Is it just like a generic big ape figure, or are there specific features people consistently report, things that make it stand out?
Yeah, good question. It's usually described as ape-like, but not exactly like any known ape. It's consistently covered in thick, dark fur, brown, black, sometimes reddish, which, it would be great camouflage in forests, especially at night. Witnesses often mention a distinct dome-shaped head, and interestingly, often no visible neck, which gives it this very solid, powerful look, head right on the shoulders.
No neck. That's specific.
Very. And the arms and legs are described as incredibly muscular, thick, suggesting real strength. Then there's the smell. A lot of reports, especially with the Florida skunk ape, mention this really strong, unpleasant, skunky, sometimes almost sulfurous odor.
Right, the skunk ape, and of course the footprints. The name Bigfoot comes from somewhere. Those tracks are huge, right? But what makes them unique besides just size?
Footprints are absolutely critical, yeah. They're a huge focus for proponents. And they're consistently large, often around 40 centimeters long, that's about 16 inches. But it's more than just length. The depth of the prints often suggests something really heavy, like over 230 kilos, maybe 500 pounds plus. But the really unique thing, the feature that anthropologists like Dr. Jeff Meldrum have focused on, is what's called the mid-tarsal pressure ridge, or mid-tarsal break.
Mid-tarsal break, what does that mean exactly?
Okay, so a human foot has a rigid arch. An ape foot is more flexible but different. This suggests a foot that has some flexibility right in the middle. A joint that allows it to bend differently than ours is neither purely ape nor purely human.
Ah, okay, so unique anatomical feature.
Exactly. Meldrum's even found evidence of dermal ridges, like fingerprints on the soles of some casts, and signs of how the toes slip and grip the ground. It suggests a living, flexing foot making the track. And it's not just feet. There are reports of large, non-human handprints too, with long fingers and distinct knuckle prints.
So that mid-tarsal break, that sounds pretty hard to fake convincingly, especially with things like dermal ridges. Because the immediate counter is always, oh, someone just strapped on some big fake feet.
That's precisely the point Meldrum makes. He argues that faking that specific anatomical detail consistently, along with the ridges and the way the weight is distributed naturally by a flexing foot, it's incredibly difficult for a hoaxer to replicate perfectly over and over again, especially on different types of ground. A rigid fake foot just wouldn't leave the same kind of detailed impression.
Makes sense. Okay, so physically imposing, unique footprints. How does it move? Does something that big lumber around, or is there a specific way it walks?
The gait is actually another key identifier. and it's often described quite specifically. It's a distinct bipedal walk, sometimes called a Groucho walk because the knees are bent, or a strangely bent knee gait. What's surprising is that despite the size, witnesses often say it moves very fluidly, even gracefully. Not like a bear awkwardly walking on its hind legs, which tends to waddle. This thing covers ground quickly with these long, deliberate strides.
Graceful, despite being huge. Interesting.
Yeah, and that famous Patterson-Gimlin film we'll talk about, it really seems to capture that specific bent knee, fluid movement.
And does it make sounds? Are there characteristic calls people report hearing?
Oh, absolutely. Bigfoot calls are a huge part of the lore. People report hearing whoops, incredibly loud howls, deep growls, sometimes even indistinct voices or chattering sounds that don't match any known animal.
Voices? Like actual speech?
Usually described as indistinct, guttural, not like human language.
Yeah.
But then there's this fascinating theory about infrasound.
Infrasound, like sounds too low for us to hear.
Exactly. Low-frequency sound that travels really well over long distances, even through dense forest. The theory is they might use it for communication, but maybe also to affect creatures around them.
Affect them how?
Some researchers speculate that infrasound could induce feelings of intense fear, dread, or unease in humans or animals nearby. Some witnesses report feeling a physical vibration or a sense of disorientation before or during a sighting. It's a chilling idea, a built-in defense mechanism we can't even consciously perceive.
Wow, okay. That adds a whole other layer of strangeness. So with all these features, huge, elusive, unique gait, maybe using infrasound, where would something like this even live? How does it stay hidden in the modern world?
That elusiveness is probably the biggest part of the mystery, isn't it? The thinking is that it prefers really remote, vast wilderness areas, places humans rarely go. We're talking over 1.5 million square kilometers of wild territory just in the US. That's an enormous area, dense old-growth forests, rugged mountains, deep valleys, sprawling swamps, plenty of places to hide.
So it actively avoids us.
It seems that way. Reports consistently describe it showing an exceptional ability to avoid human contact, almost like it's a deliberate strategy. It's likely nocturnal, using cover, incredibly stealthy.
Okay, and what does it eat? Is it a terrifying predator stalking the woods?
Surprisingly, maybe not. Most observations suggest it's primarily vegetarian or omnivorous, eating plants, berries, roots, soft marsh grasses. Some reports mention it eating fish. It doesn't seem to be typically described as hunting or attacking other large animals, although there is that intriguing evidence suggesting marrow extraction from bones.
Marrow extraction, like early humans did.
Exactly, snapping large bones to get the rich marrow inside. That suggests it has the strength and maybe the intelligence for that kind of behavior, pointing towards a broader diet when needed. But it doesn't seem to be its primary food source, not like a bear or a wolf hunting deer.
And is it thought to stay in one place, or does it move around?
There's a strong theory about seasonal migration, that these creatures might travel thousands of kilometers following food sources with the seasons. Some speculate they move north, maybe even near the Arctic Circle, for breeding in the summer, then migrate south through remote corridors for the winter.
Wow. Immense, strong, incredibly elusive, maybe nomadic, possibly using infrasound. It really paints a picture of something extraordinary. It makes you wonder. Have you, listener, ever heard a Bigfoot story from your own area? A local legend, maybe? We'd love to hear about it. Now, when we think Bigfoot today, it feels very North American, right? Especially the Pacific Northwest. But this idea of a wild man, it goes back way further than the name Bigfoot, doesn't it? Where do the very first reports actually come from?
That's a really important point. The name Bigfoot itself is pretty modern, only coined in 1958 after those tracks were found. But the idea, that's ancient. It's deeply woven into the oral traditions of indigenous peoples across North America, long, long before Europeans arrived. And it's not just one or two tribes, it's this recurring theme across many different cultures, each with their own names and specific stories about these beings.
So, not just Bigfoot. What are some of these other names and descriptions from different indigenous traditions?
Right. Probably the most famous is Sasquatch, used by tribes in Canada and northern Washington. That name's become almost interchangeable with Bigfoot internationally. Further south, in Northern California, you hear about Oma, described as a large, hairy, but generally shy forest dweller. Up in Alaska, Eskimo communities talk about the Bushman, and their stories are incredibly rich. Sometimes the Bushman sings in a strange language, warns people about floods, or even does things like bringing bodies of people who died on the ice back to their villages for burial.
Wow, bringing bodies back. That's benevolent, almost.
It can be. Sometimes the Bushman is seen as the king of animals, a sort of protector, but other stories warn of its anger if it's disrespected. So complex.
That's fascinating. What about other parts of the continent?
Down in Florida, in the swamps, the Seminole and Miccosukee tribes have stories of a creature very similar to the skunk ape. They call it Est Japchi, which means tall man. And they explicitly see it as a protector of the forest, a guardian figure.
A protector, interesting.
And then in the Appalachian Mountains, the Cherokee talk about giant hair-covered people-like things, sometimes called the wood booger. Those legends can be darker, sometimes mentioning these creatures carrying away children who wandered off, which connects to that universal boogeyman idea.
So these are ancient oral traditions. Is there any other evidence, like historical records or artifacts, that might point to these creatures beyond just stories?
Yes, there actually is. There are ancient rock drawings, some estimated to be around 700 years old, found in areas indigenous people considered sacred. These drawings show these stick people figures with distinctively large hands and feet, remarkably similar to modern Bigfoot descriptions. It suggests people were seeing and depicting something like this a very long time ago.
Stick people with big hands and feet.
And chillingly, some of these drawings seem to tell stories of these figures abducting children, which apparently led some communities to abandon their villages out of fear. Beyond that, if you look at diaries from early European settlers in the 17th and 18th centuries, you find descriptions of wild men or unusually large hairy bears that walk upright, matching Bigfoot descriptions. These were independent observations before the modern Bigfoot craze.
So consistent descriptions across cultures and centuries, it really makes you ask, why does this idea persist so strongly? Is it just folklore, or could it be something deeper?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it opens up some really fascinating possibilities. One major theory is the idea of genetic memory.
Genetic memory, like we inherit memories.
Sort of. The idea is that these universal wild man myths might be subconscious echoes from a time when our ancestors, Homo sapiens, actually shared the planet with other hominid species. Think about the recent discoveries. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, the Hobbit, Homo naledi. We now know our family tree is much bushier than we thought. Earth used to have multiple types of human-like beings walking around.
Right. We weren't the only ones for a long time.
Exactly. Multiple intelligent bipedal hominids coexisted. And here's a fascinating detail. A Denisovan molar tooth, found from just a tiny finger bone fragment, was analyzed. It's described as much larger than human or Neanderthal and fits perfectly with Bigfoot descriptions.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So the genetic memory theory suggests our collective human psyche might hold these residual archetypes, these deep ancient memories of encountering other upright, intelligent beings. Bigfoot could be a manifestation of that buried history.
That's a mind-bending thought, a kind of echo in our collective unconscious. Is there maybe a simpler psychological explanation too? A human need it fulfills?
Oh, definitely. There's also the idea of the romantic search for the wild man. Especially in our modern urbanized world, there might be this deep yearning for connection to something primal, to nature untamed. Bigfoot, in that sense, becomes a powerful symbol, a link to our own wilder past, a time before we separated ourselves so much from the natural world. The idea that something like that still exists out there hidden, it taps into our fascination with mystery, with the possibility that not everything is known or controllable.
It preserves a sense of wonder, maybe.
Exactly. It keeps the world feeling a bit bigger, a bit wilder than our everyday lives might suggest.
It's a powerful idea. So listener, what do you think? Did ancient cultures encode real sightings in their myths, or is it purely symbolic, this persistent legend? Okay, so we have these ancient roots, these consistent descriptions, but let's jump to the modern era. How do today's sightings and reports compare? Is the picture getting clearer, more consistent, or is it just more noise, more chaos?
It's a bit of both, honestly, which makes it complicated. On one hand, the core description remains remarkably consistent.
Yeah.
If you compare those 700-year-old rock drawings to a witness report from last year, you still get large, bipedal, hairy hominid, elusive, prefers deep wilderness. That fundamental image is incredibly stable across centuries.
Okay, so the basic creature described is consistent.
Right. But on the other hand, the reporting in the modern era, that's where the chaos comes in. A big part of that is, frankly, hoaxes.
Yeah, you see goofy videos all the time.
Exactly. Bigfoot has become this huge commercial industry, books, TV shows, merchandise. That creates a massive incentive for people to fake sightings for attention or money. There was that tragic case, Randy Lee Tenley, who died trying to stage a Bigfoot hoax. The sheer number of pranks and fakes, especially online, makes it incredibly hard to take any single report at face value. It definitely breeds cynicism.
Understandably. What else adds to the chaos?
Misidentification is huge. So many sightings are likely just known animals misinterpreted. Bears are a classic example. They can stand up, look surprisingly humanoid for a moment, especially at a distance or in bad light.
Right, a bear standing up could definitely look like something.
Probably. Or think about tracks in snow.
Yeah.
A small print can melt and spread out, looking enormous.
Right.
Or a bear might step its hind foot perfectly into its front footprint, creating what looks like one giant bipedal track. We saw this with the Yeti, right? Genetic testing on alleged Yeti hair samples almost always comes back as bear, usually the Tibetan bear.
So even with better technology, we get more confusion.
Kind of, yeah. We have thermal cameras, drones, night vision, but we still lack that one piece of definitive, undeniable proof. What we mostly get are blurry photos, shaky videos, compelling stories, but nothing that meets the standard of scientific proof, which is usually a body, a bone, or verifiable DNA.
So the core idea is stable, but the modern signal is drowned out by noise.
That's a good way to put it. The fundamental concept seems incredibly persistent, maybe for those deep historical or psychological reasons we talked about, but the quality of modern reporting is all over the place, making it really tough to find the genuine signal, if it's there.
Okay, let's dive into the evidence people do point to. Perhaps the most famous piece is that Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. For some, it's the absolute proof. For others, just a guy in a suit. What makes people believe it's real?
The arguments for its authenticity are pretty strong, especially considering it was 1967. The creature in the film, Patty, has this really unique walk, its strangely bent knee gait we mentioned. It's not like a human walking normally, and it's not like an ape. It's fluid, powerful, and the muscles seem to move under the skin. Experts in biomechanics like Dr. Meldrum have analyzed it and noted the proportions seem off for a human, and the way the weight shifts looks very natural for a large, non-human biped.
So the argument is it looks too real, too anatomically convincing for a 1960s costume. Because a man in a suit is the main rebuttal.
Exactly. Proponents point to visible muscle movement, the way the fur seems to lie naturally, even a moment where it seems to wipe its hand on its thigh. They argue that faking that kind of detail, that specific gait, with the materials and techniques available back then would have been incredibly difficult, maybe impossible. It's often pointed out that even the Hollywood folks who made the Planet of the Apes costumes around the same time, with big budgets, said they couldn't have made something that convincing, that fluid. So the argument is, it's past decades of scrutiny and still looks remarkably real.
Okay, that's a compelling case for authenticity. What's the counter? Why do skeptics still say, nope, it's a hoax?
The main counterargument is simple and consistent. It's still just a film. No matter how good it looks, it's not physical proof. Science needs a body, a bone, testable DNA. A film, however convincing, isn't that. Skeptics also point to the context. Roger Patterson, one of the filmmakers, apparently had some financial troubles and maybe saw it as a way to make money. The film definitely did kickstart the modern Bigfoot industry, creating an incentive for hoaxes later on.
So potential financial motive plus the lack of physical evidence.
Pretty much. For skeptics, until there's a verifiable physical specimen linked to that film or creature type, it remains unproven, however intriguing it looks.
It's been argued back and forth for over 50 years now. What's your gut feeling, listener? When you see that footage, what do you think? Real or fake? All right, moving on from film. Let's talk tracks and footprints again. We know they're common evidence, but are they compelling? Or mostly fakes and mistakes?
Well, this is where Dr. Meldrum's work on the anatomy is so crucial. He argues that the really compelling footprints aren't just big. They show that specific mid-tarsal break, that flexibility in the middle of the foot that's anatomically distinct from humans and known apes. He's also documented dermal ridges, like fingerprints on some casts, and the way the toes seem to flex and grip.
So again, specific anatomical details that suggest a real living foot, not just a carved block.
That's the argument. These prints are consistently large, around 16 inches, deep enough to suggest a very heavy creature. Meldrum believes the consistency of these unique features across multiple different trackways, sometimes found years apart, but seemingly from the same individual creature based on the details, makes them very hard to explain away as hoaxes. He's even developed criteria to try and distinguish what he considers anatomically consistent prints from obvious fakes, based on this complexity and how a real foot would distribute weight.
That sounds pretty convincing, but we know fakes are easy to make, right? And we talked about misidentification with bears or melting snow. How do researchers navigate that?
That's the constant challenge. Everyone acknowledges that fake prints are out there and probably quite common. Making a simple Bigfoot shape isn't hard. That definitely fuels skepticism. And misidentification is always possible. Bear tracks overlapping, prints distorting in mud or snow. These can fool people. Remember the Yeti hair turning out to be bear DNA?
Yeah.
That looms large. So while Meldrum's analysis of the anatomy in some specific casts is compelling to proponents, for the broader scientific community, footprints alone, without a creature to connect them to, remain suggestive at best. They need the source of the print.
Tantalizing, but not quite the smoking gun. Okay, so that brings us to more recent encounters. With all the tech we have now, thermal cameras, drones, better audio recording, are there any modern sightings or bits of evidence that stand out? Anything that's made even skeptics go, okay, that's weird.
Yeah, there definitely are a few modern cases that have raised eyebrows. Take Paul Freeman's findings back in the 90s. He found tracks and even shot some video. Now, Freeman himself was controversial, but Dr. Meldrum studied his casts extensively. Meldrum was initially skeptical, but became convinced by the sheer anatomical consistency of that mid-tarsal break across multiple prints Freeman found, reportedly from the same individual creature over time. That consistency was hard to ignore.
Okay, consistency in anatomy. What about using tech like thermal imaging? That seems harder to fake, showing heat signatures.
It does offer a different perspective. Stacey Brown's thermal footage from 2012 in Florida is a key example. It shows a large bipedal figure moving through the woods. What was significant was the uniform heat signature across its body, suggesting no clothes. A wildlife biologist who looked at it called it a large primate, but noted the legs seemed too long for known apes and the gait was different. The camera's older, so it's blurry, but that consistent heat on a moving bipedal form was intriguing.
Right. A uniform heat signature argues against a person in a suit, potentially. What about clear video? Anything more recent that's compelling?
One that often comes up is Chuck Newton's ATV video from 2009, shot in the Appalachians. It shows a large, hairy, humanoid figure just casually walking across the path in front of their ATV. What stands out is the reaction of the people filming it seems genuinely startled, not acted. And the creature itself moves with clear bipedalism, long strides, very different from a bear. Didn't seem panicked, just crossed the path. Meldrum suggested maybe the stream noise masked the ATV sound initially.
Casual crossing. Interesting. What about audio? Any recordings that experts just can't identify?
Lloyd Sims' recordings from 2022 in Texas are interesting. He captured dozens of really strange sounds. Whoops, howls, chatter in the Sam Houston National Forest. He spent years trying to match them to known animals and couldn't. What makes them more compelling is that a forensic audio analyst, Dr. Robert Marr, studied them. He compared them to all known local wildlife sounds. He noted maybe a slight similarity to a coyote howl in one part, but ultimately concluded it was unknown animal noise. He couldn't pin it down. That kind of expert uncertainty is significant.
Yeah, when an audio expert says unknown, that carries weight. Has anyone really dedicated their life to this, brought years of tracking experience to the table?
Yes. Ivan Mars is a fascinating case. He's a very experienced tracker, apparently worked for government agencies before. He started as a skeptic, but became a believer through decades of his own fieldwork. He talks about finding those 700-year-old rock drawings, discovering huge footprints and handprints himself that didn't match anything known, and claims to have photos that passed analysis, though scientists still question them. He even describes observing multiple Bigfoots, an older one and a younger one, in a remote marsh, watching them eat plants and fish. It reinforces that idea of a potentially peaceful, family-oriented creature.
Observing them directly. That's quite a claim.
It is. And then you have the more recent findings from the Expedition Bigfoot TV show in the 2020s. They reported a cluster of interesting evidence, things like large non-human handprints showing knuckle marks, tracks with a mix of human and ape traits, even a freshly killed deer with bones snapped in a specific way, suggesting marrow extraction, that intelligent, maybe hominid behavior again.
And didn't they find tools or something, too?
Yes, potential tools made from volcanic glass. That really points towards intelligence, planning, sophisticated survival skills, more than just an animal.
And the audio they captured was particularly striking, wasn't it?
That was perhaps the most startling part. Using very sensitive equipment, they recorded what sounded like deep, indistinct voices. They brought in a linguist, Dr. Ronald Cosper. He analyzed the sounds and concluded they sounded human or nearly human. And crucially, he thought he could identify specific word-like units. Wave, flat, cumber, suggesting not just calls, but maybe actual complex, possibly linguistic communication.
Wow. Words. That really pushes the boundary. All these accounts. They really make you pause, don't they? Listener, have you or someone you know ever had an experience like this? Something truly unexplainable out in the woods? Okay, so we have these compelling bits of evidence, the film, the tracks, thermal images, weird audio, eyewitness accounts. But despite all that, the scientific mainstream, the media, they mostly dismiss Bigfoot pretty aggressively. Why is that? What's really behind the skepticism?
Well, the number one reason, hands down, is what scientists call the no body, no bone, no specimen problem. Science, especially biology, relies on physical evidence you can touch, measure, dissect, analyze genetically. Photos can be faked or blurry, videos can be unclear, footprints can be misinterpreted, stories are anecdotal. Without a physical specimen, a type specimen as they call it, you can't scientifically describe or confirm a new species. That's the gold standard, and Bigfoot hasn't met it.
Makes sense from a purely scientific method perspective, but does the sheer number of hoaxes hurt the cause too?
Absolutely. The whole Bigfoot business, the TV shows, the merchandise, the tourism, creates a huge incentive for people to fake things. Every time a clear hoax gets exposed, it damages the credibility of the entire field. It makes scientists and the public very wary. Plus, that tragic story of Randy Lee Tenley dying while trying to fake a sighting. It just highlights how far people might go, and it adds a layer of absurdity or danger that pushes serious researchers away.
Right, the commercialization definitely muddies the waters, and misidentification is still a major factor.
Huge factor. Like we said, bears standing up, weird tracks in snow or mud. These happen all the time. And cognitive biases play a role too, people wanting to see something mysterious, or their brains misinterpreting ambiguous shapes in the woods, especially in low light or stressful situations. Science demands ruling out all conventional explanations first.
Okay, what about credible witnesses, though? You hear stories about police officers, park rangers, people who should be reliable observers. Why don't we hear more from them officially?
That gets into professional fear. It's a real thing. Many credible people who believe they've encountered something simply don't report it, or wait years, even decades. They fear that they will be ridiculed, called crazy, maybe even damage their careers. If you're a police officer or a biologist claiming you saw Bigfoot, well, it can unfortunately lead to professional ostracization. That fear silences a lot of potentially valuable accounts.
So fear of ridicule keeps potential evidence hidden.
It definitely contributes. And then finally, you have the more speculative, harder to prove theories about why evidence might be actively suppressed. Some people believe governments or powerful industries might have reasons to keep Bigfoot a secret.
Like what kind of reasons?
The main one floated is economic. If Bigfoot were proven real and declared endangered, it could shut down huge areas to logging, mining, oil drilling. Think of the spotted owl controversy in the Pacific Northwest, which hit the timber industry hard. So the theory goes, powerful interests might pressure governments to ignore or hide evidence to protect profits.
So it's a mix of strict scientific standards, the noise from hoaxes and misidentification, fear of ridicule, and maybe even deliberate suppression.
Exactly. It's a complex web of factors that keeps Bigfoot largely outside the realm of accepted science, despite the persistent reports.
This brings up a fascinating possibility. Could Bigfoot actually be a surviving hominid species? Maybe related to something like Gigantopithecus, that giant extinct ape. From a scientific view, what would need to be true for something like that to exist today, undetected?
Yeah, that's a major line of thinking for many proponents, especially anthropologists like Meldrum. The idea isn't just an unknown ape, but specifically an undiscovered hominid part of our broader human family tree, a relic species that survive.
And what evidence points towards hominid rather than just unknown ape?
It comes back to those specific traits we discussed. The unique foot anatomy, that mid-tarsal break, suggests specialized bipedal locomotion different from known apes. Then there's the evidence for potential intelligence, the tool use suggested by those volcanic glass finds, the marrow extraction, which is a classic early human behavior for getting high-value food.
Right, behaviors linked to cognitive ability.
Exactly. And the complex vocalizations, if that linguist was right about identifying word-like sounds that points towards communication way beyond typical animal calls, these things together paint a picture much closer to a primitive hominid than just a big ape.
Okay, that's compelling. But is there any actual precedent for finding new hominid species this late in the game? Hasn't our family tree been pretty well mapped out?
You'd think so, but recent discoveries have really shaken that up. Think about the Denisovans, identified only in 2010 from literally just a tiny finger bone and a couple of teeth found in a Siberian cave. DNA showed they were a distinct human group that coexisted and even interbred with our ancestors. Or Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, found in Indonesia in 2004, a small-bodied, small-brained hominid species that lived potentially as recently as 50,000 years ago. And what's amazing is its discovery lined up with local legends of small, hairy forest people called Ibu Gogo.
Whoa, the legend matched the fossil find.
Pretty closely, yeah. And then there's Homo naledi, found deep in a cave system in South Africa in 2013. Another entirely new hominid species, seemingly practicing complex burial rituals. These finds prove that our understanding of human evolution is still incomplete, and that other hominid species persisted in isolated pockets much later than we used to think. It makes the idea of another undiscovered relic hominid, like Bigfoot, scientifically much more plausible than it seemed, say, 30 years ago.
Okay, so the precedent exists. If Bigfoot is a surviving hominid, what conditions would absolutely need to be met for it to still be around today, hiding from us?
Several things would have to line up perfectly. First, vast, inaccessible habitat. That 1.5 million square kilometers of wilderness in the U.S. alone, plus huge areas in Canada, dense forests, rugged mountains, swamps, places with natural shelters like caves or dense thickets where they can remain hidden. Second, abundant food. Enough plants, roots, berries, fish, maybe occasional marrow to sustain a large-bodied primate year-round.
Right.
This probably requires migration to follow seasonal food sources.
Makes sense. Habitat and food. What else?
Third, and maybe most crucial, exceptional evasion. They'd need to be primarily nocturnal, incredibly stealthy, highly intelligent to anticipate human movement and avoid detection. That infrasound theory, if true, would be a massive advantage for stealth and deterrence. And finally, a viable breeding population. There have to be enough of them to reproduce successfully and maintain genetic diversity without constant inbreeding. This implies effective ways of finding mates across vast distances and maybe secretive nesting or denning behaviors to protect vulnerable young. Sightings of juveniles are rare, suggesting mothers might keep them hidden until they're older.
So it's plausible, but requires a specific set of circumstances and remarkable abilities.
Plausible within the bounds of biology, yes, but definitely pushing the limits of what we currently know.
You know, everything we've just discussed sounds pretty biological, like an undiscovered animal or hominid. But some theories about Bigfoot go way stranger, into what researchers call high strangeness. Is it possible Bigfoot isn't purely biological? Could it be something else?
This is where things get really speculative, definitely moving beyond mainstream science. But yes, there are persistent accounts that are hard to fit into a purely biological box, like the vanishing axe. Some witnesses, even those using technology like drones, report the creature disappearing abruptly, almost fading from view, rather than just running away quickly. That suggests something beyond normal camouflage or speed.
Fading from view. Okay, yeah, that's not typical animal behavior. What about the effects on witnesses? You mentioned the fear from infrasound, but is there more?
The infrasound idea itself borders on high strangeness for some. The suggestion isn't just that it scares you, but that it can directly affect the physiology, cause deep dread, disorientation, physical vibrations. It's a physical effect, maybe, but one that feels almost psychic or manipulative to the person experiencing it. It's a level of interaction beyond simple predator-prey encounters.
And the intelligence factor, are we talking tool use or something even more conscious?
The potential tool use and marrow extraction already suggest high intelligence. But some accounts hint at something more profound. Problem solving, maybe environmental manipulation, adapting in ways that seem almost deliberate, planned, not just instinct. It blurs that line between advanced animal and something closer to human-level cognition, maybe operating in ways we don't understand.
What about the indigenous legends? Do they ever point towards something supernatural beyond just a physical creature?
Oh, definitely. Many indigenous traditions don't see Sasquatch or its equivalents as just an animal. The Himalayan Yeti, for example, is often seen as magic or sacred, living on the border of the physical and spiritual world. A protector of sacred mountains, not just a beast. Those Alaskan Eskimo stories of the Bushman singing or having spirits speak through it, that clearly places it in a spiritual or mystical category. It's imbued with meaning and power beyond biology.
And then there are the really out there theories, UFOs, interdimensional beings.
Yeah, that's the far end of the spectrum. But there are reports, like that one from Washington State, describing a Bigfoot appearing seemingly out of a beam of light from a silver disk UFO and then vanishing back into it. This leads to speculation that maybe Bigfoot isn't native to Earth, or it's some kind of interdimensional entity, or even related to stranger things, like the Montauk monster theories involving genetic hybrids. These ideas take Bigfoot completely out of the realm of zoology and into, well, paranormal investigation or science fiction.
Okay, wow. From undiscovered ape to interdimensional entity, the theories cover a lot of ground. This whole discussion, especially the idea of something intelligent and elusive hiding out there, inevitably leads to another big question: government secrecy. Is it plausible that someone, maybe the government or some shadowy group, actually knows Bigfoot is real and is actively hiding the truth?
That's a theory you hear constantly in Bigfoot circles, yeah. The idea of a cover-up. It often gets tied into broader conspiracy theories, like a rumored American book of secrets holding classified information about mysteries the public isn't supposed to know.
Is there anything specific that fuels these suspicions? Any incidents where it looked like information was being deliberately shut down?
The Expedition Bigfoot TV show shutdown is often cited as prime example. Remember, they reported finding not just tracks and handprints, but those potential tools, and, crucially, the audio recordings that the linguist identified as having potential word-like structures sounding human or nearly human. The fact that government agencies reportedly intervened and seemed to halt further investigation right after these significant finds, well, it definitely raised suspicions. It made a lot of people think the team had stumbled onto something too significant for the public to know, and that there was a vested interest in keeping the results under wraps.
Okay, but why? If they found proof of something so monumental, why hide it? What would be the motive for suppression?
Several potential motives get discussed. The economic one is big. Fear that proving Bigfoot exists and needing to protect its habitat would devastate industries like logging, mining, oil. The spotted owl precedent showed that protecting one species can have massive economic ripple effects. Powerful lobbies might want it kept quiet. Another is public panic. The confirmation of a large, intelligent, unknown hominid living wild could cause widespread fear, social disruption, maybe even challenge religious beliefs for some. Governments generally prefer stability. Then there are the ethical dilemmas. If this is a sentient, intelligent species, maybe even close to human, discovering it opens a massive can of worms. How do you protect it? Do you study it? What are its rights? It could fundamentally change our relationship with the natural world and our definition of humanity. Maybe some feel it's better left unknown.
And the most fundamental reason, the challenge to our own origins.
Exactly. If Bigfoot is a surviving hominid, a missing link, it could rewrite human evolution. It might threaten everything we know about the origin of mankind. If it uses tools, communicates, it blurs the lines. That kind of paradigm shift is something established institutions might resist.
It's a lot to think about. How do people with serious training, like soldiers or survival experts, deal with unknowns in the wild? Is there any hint they get briefed on things like this if the government does know something?
Our sources don't confirm secret military briefings on Bigfoot, but they do show how experienced people react. Ivan Mars, the tracker, relies on his expert skills, but acknowledges the deep mystery. Stacy Brown Sr., the retired Army Ranger, his immediate reaction to seeing that thermal figure was full-blown panic mode, asking for his gun. That suggests a deep ingrained caution towards genuine unknowns that standard training might not fully prepare you for. We do know the U.S. Forest Service has acknowledged reports and even investigated claims like Paul Freeman's, so there's at least some level of official protocol for looking into sightings, even if skeptically. And some people point to weird legal things, like how it's supposedly legal to shoot Bigfoot in Texas, but illegal in Skamania County, Washington, as strange inconsistencies. They interpret that as maybe indirect evidence of some kind of hidden policy or acknowledgement, a way to protect something imaginary without admitting it's real.
The legal angle is interesting, so listener, what do you think? In today's world of constant connection and information sharing, could a secret like this actually be kept? Let's shift to another dark corner of the Bigfoot legend. The connection, or lack thereof, to missing persons. Those old wood booger stories mentioned carrying kids away, right? Is there anything to that, or is it just scary folklore?
The folklore is definitely there, and it taps into primal fears. Those Appalachian wood booger tales explicitly mentioned it, carrying away small children, linking it directly to the boogeyman archetype. And Ivan Mars mentioned hearing stories of hunters torn to shreds, lost campers during his research, though he emphasized sorting fact from fiction. The deep woods have always been a place where fears of the unknown take shape.
So that's the historical fear. What about modern times? Does anyone like Ivan Mars, who spent so much time out there, see any connection, even indirectly, between disappearances in these remote areas?
Ivan Mars did make a chilling observation. He said that in the really remote, truly wild areas where Bigfoot is believed to live, we found the remains of people who tried to get into this wilderness and were never seen again. Now, crucially, he doesn't blame Bigfoot for those deaths. His point is more that these vanishings happen in the exact kind of harsh, unforgiving terrain that this creature supposedly inhabits. The wilderness itself is incredibly dangerous, and people get lost, injured, or worse, regardless of cryptids.
Okay, so the danger's real, but not necessarily linked to Bigfoot itself. What about Bigfoot's potential capability for harm? We talked about it snapping bones from marrow. That suggests immense strength.
That's the paradox, isn't it? The evidence of bone breaking shows it clearly has the physical power to be dangerous. The expedition Bigfoot team found those freshly killed animals with bones snapped from marrow. However, despite this capability, the overwhelming majority of reports emphasize its avoidance behavior. It seems to actively choose not to engage with humans. The terrain it favors is described as ideal for a creature looking to avoid human contact. Its apparent desire to remain hidden suggests a preference for avoidance over confrontation. Even in encounters like Chuck Newton's ATV video, the creature seemed indifferent, just crossing the path, content to mind their own business.
So capable of harm, but seemingly choosing not to be harmful.
That seems to be the picture painted by most modern accounts, contrasting with the darker folklore. It presents this fascinating ambiguity, immense power coupled with extreme elusiveness. Maybe the real danger in those woods is simply getting lost or succumbing to the elements, and Bigfoot just becomes a convenient figure onto which we project our fears of the vast, indifferent wilderness.
Right, it highlights how easily legends can grow in places where people simply disappear. Now, we keep talking about Bigfoot, Sasquatch. It feels so strongly North American. Is this phenomenon unique to here? Or do other parts of the world have their own versions of a large, hairy, elusive humanoid?
Oh, absolutely not unique to North America. While the name Bigfoot is American and the culture around it is particularly strong here, the basic archetype, the elusive, hairy wild man, is found practically everywhere, on almost every continent except Antarctica. It's a near universal legend.
Okay, so why did North America become the Bigfoot hotspot? What makes the story so prominent here?
It's likely a combination of things. First, the sheer amount of suitable wilderness, those vast remote forests and mountains, provide a plausible habitat. Second, those really iconic pieces of evidence, especially the Patterson-Gimlin film, captured the public imagination in a huge way, became internationally famous. Third, there's a massive cultural and commercial investment here. Bigfoot is, weirdly, one of America's biggest brands. Books, TV, movies, tourism, it's deeply embedded in pop culture. And fourth, crucially, the deep roots in indigenous legends, Sasquatch, wood booger, etc., provided a foundation long before the modern name emerged. All these factors kind of converge here.
Makes sense. What about some of those other global versions? The Yeti is the obvious one. How does it compare?
Right? The Yeti, or abominable snowman of the Himalayas, is probably the most famous counterpart. The legends there often have a more mystical or spiritual flavor, seeing it as a sacred being of the mountains, dwelling on the border of the physical and spiritual world. However, from a scientific standpoint, much of the Yeti evidence tracks, hair samples has been pretty strongly linked to misidentification of bears, particularly the Tibetan bear. Genetic testing really pointed towards bears, in most cases investigated rigorously.
Okay, so Yeti might be more bear than Bigfoot-like. Any others that are particularly interesting?
China has legends of the Yeren, the wild man, going back centuries, often described as reddish-haired. Then there's the orang pendek in Sumatra, Indonesia, a smaller, maybe 3 to 5 foot tall, hairy biped. What's fascinating about orang pendek is how well it matches the description of Homo floresiensis, the fossil hobbit species found on the nearby island of Flores. That discovery lends a lot of credibility to the local stories of small, wild forest people.
Wow, another case of legend potentially matching science later on.
Exactly. And you find less specific wild people legends scattered across parts of Africa and South America too, even in places without native great apes. It suggests the archetype runs really deep.
So despite the different names, locations, even sizes sometimes, are there common themes that tie all these global wild man legends together?
Definitely. The core elements are almost always bipedal posture, covered in hair, extremely elusive, inhabiting remote wilderness areas. They're often linked to indigenous knowledge or oral traditions, and frequently they get discussed in the context of being a missing link or an undiscovered hominid species, just like Bigfoot. They all represent that enduring mystery, that possibility of something human-like, yet fundamentally wild and unknown, existing just beyond the edges of our mapped world.
It's amazing how widespread that basic idea is. Listener, did you grow up hearing a different name for this kind of creature? Maybe a local version of the wild man legend? Thinking about these connections to indigenous knowledge and spirituality, could Bigfoot, Or these other creatures represent something more than just a biological puzzle? Could they be seen as environmental guardians or even nature spirits?
That's a really important dimension, often lost in the focus on just proving biological existence. For many indigenous cultures, these beings are absolutely not just animals. They hold deep symbolic and often sacred meaning. Look at the Seminole and Mogi tribes in Florida, calling the skunk ape Estikapkaki, the tall man, and explicitly stating he was the protector of the forest. That's a direct role as a guardian of the natural world.
A protector. That's a powerful image. Does that mystical status appear elsewhere?
Very much so. We mentioned the Himalayan Yeti being seen as magic or sacred, living on that border of the physical and spiritual. It's not just something to be tracked and captured. It's revered, sometimes feared, as part of the spiritual landscape. And those Eskimo legends of the Bushmen singing, warning of floods, or having spirits speak through it, that elevates it far beyond a simple creature. It's interacting with the human world on a level that implies awareness, maybe even purpose.
And you mentioned stories where it actively helps people too.
Yes, that incredible Eskimo account of Bigfoot bringing the bodies of the dead back from the ice for burial, that's an act of profound compassion and connection, suggesting a role not just as a wild creature, but as something that understands and interacts with human community and ritual. Also, the reference to it as the king of animals implies stewardship, responsibility for the ecosystem it inhabits.
So what does this recurring theme tell us about our need for this archetype? Why is the idea of a wild, guardian-like figure so appealing?
One perspective, like that from Sasquatch, is that it reflects a romantic search for connection. As we become more urbanized, more disconnected from raw nature, maybe we yearn for a symbol of what it means to be truly part of the wild, not separate from it. Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, can represent a kind of human who feels inseparable from nature. A link to our own evolutionary past when we lived closer to the earth, maybe coexisting with other hominids. It's a symbol of a lost unity, perhaps, a reminder of primal roots.
So the mystery isn't just what it is, but what it represents to us.
Exactly. It taps into deep questions about our relationship with nature, with spirituality, with our own past. It offers a different way of seeing the world, maybe one that's more integrated and less purely dominant.
Given all this potential depth, the history, the symbolism, the potential biology, why does modern culture seem so focused on just debunking? What do we actually lose when we dismiss these stories out of hand? Just laugh them off as silly superstition?
That's a really critical question.
Yeah.
Because the losses are significant.
Yeah.
The drive to debunk comes partly from science's necessary demand for hard evidence that no body, no bone rule. Scientists need proof, and anecdotes don't cut it. Ivan Mars found that out even with photos. They asked, "Show his remains." But this rigid focus on only one kind of proof can overshadow other ways of knowing, other kinds of significance. It feeds that fear of ridicule we talked about. People with experiences stay silent. Potentially valuable information gets lost because it doesn't fit the accepted scientific box.
So we lose potential data points, essentially.
We lose data, yes, but we lose more than that. We lose the connection to the spiritual and symbolic meaning. When we reduce centuries of indigenous stories about guardians and sacred beings to just misidentified bears or folklore, we dismiss entire worldviews. We strip away layers of meaning and cultural significance. We also conveniently sidestep ethical responsibility. If there's even a small chance a sentient, elusive species is out there trying to avoid us, our relentless encroachment on wilderness raises huge ethical questions. Do we have a right to invade its habitat, to hunt it down for proof? Debunking lets us avoid those uncomfortable questions about conservation and interspecies ethics.
It lets us off the hook, in a way.
Exactly. We also lose that connection to wilderness and our primal roots. Bigfoot, as a symbol, links us to the untamed parts of the world, and maybe the untamed parts of ourselves. Dismissing it reinforces our separation from nature, makes the wild seem less mysterious, less sacred, just territory to be exploited.
And potentially we lose actual discovery.
Yes, if those theories about suppression for economic reasons are true, we might be sacrificing profound discoveries, biological, cultural, even philosophical, just for the sake of maintaining the status quo or protecting profits. We choose control over curiosity, expediency over truth. The cost is a potential shrinking of our understanding of life itself.
Wow. When you frame it like that, the obsession with simple debunking seems quite costly. It really forces us to look at ourselves. So let's do that. Let's flip the whole question around. Forget asking if Bigfoot is real for a moment. What if it is real? And we are the intruders in its world. Maybe the real mystery isn't about what Bigfoot is, but about what we've become.
That's a powerful reframing, and it really shifts the perspective. If we assume Bigfoot is real, based on the consistent descriptions, what do we see? We see a likely peaceful, highly elusive, probably intelligent species, one that has made a conscious choice for maybe centuries to avoid us. Its incredible ability to hide, its desperate effort to keep alive by remaining unseen, its adaptation to the harshest environments. It all points to a being that understands the threat humans pose and simply wants to be left alone to exist. Ivan Mars, watching them eat plants and fish, reinforces that image, not aggressive monsters, but inhabitants trying to live quietly.
Okay, so if that's Bigfoot's perspective, how do our actions look from that viewpoint? Our search, our cameras, our debates?
From that perspective, our actions look like, well, a relentless invasion. A relentless pursuit, whether it's driven by scientific curiosity, the desire for fame, or commercial profit, is a constant intrusion into its life and habitat. We deploy increasingly sophisticated technology, thermal, drones, sensitive audio, seismic sensors pushing deeper and deeper into the last remote corners of the planet. It's not just observing, it's surveillance on a massive scale, hunting down something that clearly doesn't want to be found.
And the commercial side we discussed, how does that look from this angle?
It looks like commodification. Taking a potentially sentient being and turning it into the Bigfoot business. T-shirts, reality shows, tourist traps, trivializes its existence, reduces it to a product for our consumption and entertainment. And worse, there's that underlying hunter's mentality. You still hear sometimes the idea that the only way to prove it's real is to kill it and drag it to the nearest town. That views the unknown not with wonder or respect, but as something to be conquered, dominated, possessed.
So looking at Bigfoot really forces us to look in the mirror.
Absolutely. It makes us ask what we've become. Are we genuinely open to discovering truths that might challenge our worldview, our place in nature, our sense of control? Or do we just want answers that confirm what we already think we know? Do we want connection or just conquest? If Bigfoot exists, its continued elusiveness might be the strongest testament not to its non-existence, but to its intelligence, its understanding of us, and its powerful will to survive in a world that relentlessly pushes into every shadow.
That is a deeply thought-provoking way to end our exploration. It leaves us with one final question for you, listener, to ponder. Do we truly want to find Bigfoot, or are we perhaps afraid of what finding it might force us to discover about ourselves?
If you stayed with us until the end, thank you. Your attention is power, your mind a weapon. If you heard something that resonated or something we missed, let us know in the comments. Share this deep dive. Spread the signal. Because truth isn't revealed, it's recovered. Stay curious, keep searching, keep questioning, because the truth, it's always there. You just need to know where to look. You've been listening to Midnight Whispers AI-01.